برنامه امروز ما به انگلیسی است. به همین خاطر پوزش می‌طلبم از اونهایی که از ایران به ما پیوستند. ما این برنامه رو داریم ضبط می‌کنیم و ظرف 2 هفته آینده با زیرنویس فارسی در سایت دانشگاه در اختیارتون قرار خواهیم داد. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Abbas Milani. Welcome to our conference on dynamic entrepreneurship in the future Iran. This is part of an ongoing series of conferences we have organized. The first one was a major conference organized with 2 groups, 2 other groups other than the Iranian Studies program. Gozar, a group of top Iranian technocrats, engineers, lawyers, academicians who are thinking about the problem of transition. The group Kai, Iranian entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. Some of the stars of Silicon Valley have come together and are thinking seriously about how to help this process of transition. The event was organized by the 3 of us, 3 groups. It brought together about 100 people from around the world, essentially. And I'm happy to say it caught the attention of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is always a good sign. Within that conference, we organized 3 panels. Those 3 panels are now available on our website. Those were in English and now are available with subtitle. One panel was on a joint effort that Iranian Studies is beginning with the law school, Stanford Law School, on how to curate reports about human rights and make them, as we say in Persian, mahkam pasand. Professor Alan Weiner from law school, who is here with us today, and one of his colleagues and the Iranian Studies program. We had a discussion about the launch of this. There is another panel discussion about transition in a comparative context with Larry Diamond, Mike McFall, and I, and a third panel on what is called in political science a pact of transition. How parts of the moderate opposition and parts of the moderate desperate regime might come together and try to save the country and avoid a conflict and make a transition possible. So this is, in a sense, the 4th of these series of conversations, and we are going to continue them. And I honestly believe that it is a historic moment, a historic conference. I don't know of any time in the 40 years of Iranian diaspora that such a sterling group of Iranian entrepreneurs have come together, have put their mind and their time and their energy in trying to think about how to save the Iranian economy and create an economy befitting the Iranian society. The list of the panelists is available online. I'm not going to take more of your time to introduce them. Everyone is here except Ms. Beschloss, who's joining us through Zoom, and Mr. Tedjarati, who is also joining us through Zoom. We have prepared a series of questions in consultation with the members of the panel. These are sort of the ideal type of questions that we think we need to think about if we are going to save the Iranian economy from its current cursed position. And all of our conferences, I must add, at least as far as the Iranian Studies program is concerned, is based on an effort to understand how to transition Iran to a secular democracy while preserving the national integrity of the country, preserving Iran as a unit, and creating a secular, inclusive, democratic polity. So to begin, we thought of all the questions that we submitted or we collected from these members of the distinguished members of the panel, we begin by asking them, what of all of these questions do you think is the most urgent in trying to understand and fix the problem of the Iranian economy? And we're going to do it alphabetically, and members of the panel can each interject, and hopefully from here on out, you won't hear my voice, and you'll hear these people talking about things that they know best and have great records of accomplishment. Please, Faraj.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Well, when you think about what this regime has done to Iran for the last 43 years, among all the crimes that they commit, one of them on the economy side is the fact that it's really an economic system of bribery, economic system of who do you know, and not really a merit-based type of an economy today. There are families that get licenses, exclusive licenses to do this, that, import this, build that, and so on and so forth, that are all tied to the regime. The second problem that we have today in that society is that over 70, and some accounts 80% of the economy is being controlled by IRGC, which itself is really what you're thinking about here is, well, that's kind of like a government-run type of system. And one of the fundamentals of success of entrepreneurship is that you have a merit-based type society. As those of you who live in Silicon Valley have been involved with entrepreneurship, you know that it's a lot of hard work. It's taken a lot of risk, aside from everything else, to go build a company, to create jobs. And what you would want to know at the end of the day is that that's the right way to do it, and that's the best way to get to your own success and also creating jobs for the society you live in. So I believe that fundamental right off the bat is you have to kind of move from the society that the economic society that they've created in Iran today to one that's merit-based society. It starts with that, because then that gives people incentive to go do the hard work and create jobs. But when you look beyond that, what we're looking at in the next few decades, you can be successful if you're building a knowledge-based type economy, right? It is going to be knowledge-based economy. One just has to look at sort of like where we live and see how rapid this transition is happening. And a lot of jobs that people think today may not exist 20, 30 years from now. So you have to build for the knowledge-based economy. And what are the fundamentals of a knowledge-based economy? Is you have to have a good ecosystem of good universities, a good education system, good K through 12. I can tell you with firsthand knowledge that is very much lacking in Iran. We are proud of our university graduates that come here and succeed in the most competitive environment. But there's a country of 85 million people whose K through 12 education is very much lacking. 60, 70 students get packed into a school, and the teacher walks in with flip-flop because he can't afford to buy shoes. That's not how you build a knowledge-based economy. So we need to kind of get to fundamentals. We need to make sure that the education, K through 12, and then, of course, universities, are available to everybody all over the country. It's a large country, and it's made up of a lot of different, cultures within our country. So we need to get everybody involved, and that starts by making sure that the kids get great education, moving up to the university system, and then at the university system we get beyond the top 4 or 5, and make sure there's some uniformity in how then they graduate from high school and graduate from university, learning how to run businesses, learning how to develop technology and how to build companies and so on. So again, merit-based, knowledge-based economy, so you got to build to that. And then, of course, the other things that are required, as we all know, is capital formation is a key. So you need to have, economic and fiscal incentives for companies and entrepreneurs and investors to come together to fund those types of activities that will lead to creation of jobs. So a lot more we can talk about, but I pass it on to others to comment as well.
Right. So I should
please.
First of all, my gratitude to you, Professor Milani, for bringing us here. You've done an amazing job. It's after 43 years, really. It was when I went to the conference in Stanford, it was the first time after 43 years that I was hopeful that our community is coming together and in a democratic platform we can speak and share our views. I totally agree with Faraj on the importance of first, obviously, regime change in Iran and getting rid of this mafia-style government in our country. In the last 43 years, they have destroyed the entire infrastructure of the country. There are certain things that are absolutely disastrously crucial to address, which is management of water resources, for instance. But when we look at the historical context of where we are, obviously, we love Iran, but we are part of a global world these days. And there are changes that are happening that are going to transform every country in the world, including United States. And although I see this as a challenge for us to fix 43 years of bad management of the country, it also, we should look at it in the glass half full as an opportunity to build it right. You know, we can use experiences from other countries that have gone through these transitions, and also the trial and error that has been done on technology, for instance, in US and democratic countries, from that learning, and make sure that doesn't happen. I'm very, very hopeful that given the educated young people in Iran, there's a majority of the population is now below 30 years old. They have a decent level of education and eagerness for change. We see it from their amazing slogan of woman, life, freedom that has become a global slogan and has been igniting similar movements all across the world. We can use this young generation that has modern values, enable them to be able to participate in the economy, as Faraj said, on a merit-based basis, so that they have access to capital, they have access to resources to rebuild our country. Obviously, the monetary policy, the overhaul of the financial and banking system in Iran, and again, there are opportunities there to do this right with the latest technologies. That thankfully we have many tech entrepreneurs both outside of Iran and inside the country, for people to start thinking. What is it? What are the principles that we all agree on, and have both long-term and short-term plans to overhaul these? So that's. I just pass it on to Fay for.
Yes, so thanks, Dr. Milani. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite, and all the colleagues and friends on the panel and everybody who's tuning in and is here. I also like to start with acknowledging the Iranian people in Iran who are leading a revolution that is not only impacting Iran, but inspiring us globally, whether we are an Iranian descent or others. You know, what they are doing is quite impressive, that in a sense they're taking a global view into this revolution, or the revolution has a global impact. Yes, they're fighting the dictatorship in Iran, and that's the first most important thing, to bring down this dictator government who have stripped the right of people for the past 43 years, regardless of gender, race, which region they're from. It's blanket, basically, IRGC government versus others. And that's very inspirational. And what they're fighting for, in a sense, is the fight for the right to be, the right to exist, the right for equality, the right to have a participation in economy. And we see some element of kind of entrepreneurial toward their resistance. They close a cafe in Amol because people did not wear the right hijab. The next day, everybody gathered in front of that coffee shop and they start dancing and playing music. That, to some degree, has the element of entrepreneurial to their resistance. Because entrepreneurial, at the end of the day, being an entrepreneur at the end of the day, means not accepting the status quo and finding a solution to the problem in a very innovative way. And these are the key elements that we can see right now what's happening in Iran and how they're leading the revolution. And yes, hard work is required to bring down the government. You have to take risk in your resistance and approach with the fight that you're doing. And at the end of the day, post-government, what we need is an integrated approach between the schools, universities, entrepreneurs, people, and basically corporate, government funding, and private funding. There is a need for bringing these together in order to create a society that to some degree doesn't have the challenges that even we are facing in developed countries. Because at the end of the day, what we're facing, on one side, Iran is going through the revolution. On the other side, the world is going through a technology revolution. Everything is changing fundamentally from the technology point of view at the same time. So it is a best time to take the advantage of the situation and take this as an opportunity and build solutions, bring the digital infrastructures, address the physical infrastructure issues, bring the new digital infrastructures, create jobs, enable people to create companies, and not only build solutions that has impact to their lives, but also be the solutions that can be sold and exported to other countries and become the fundamental layers of platform that other countries can use. So these are all all stars are lining up, and there's a massive opportunity to take from here and build the country the same way that after World War II, Japan and Germany basically led the manufacturing, led the automation, and became the lead in that sector. The same way Iran right now has the opportunity to not only create the economy from natural resources to build the physical infrastructure, but also the lead in the next generation of digital solutions, as well as a merit-based participation into digital economy, which is going to be very different than what we are experiencing, the digital economy that we're experiencing today in even developed countries.
Great, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it might be helpful to start with some facts. The Iranian economy in 1978, between 1960 and 1978, grew by 3.5 times. And from 1978 to today, it's shrunk by 1/3 on a per capita basis. So if you just start with that fundamental premise and compare it to either countries in the region, Turkey comes to mind, or other countries that were in a similar stage of development, like Singapore, I think the track record speaks for itself. So let's start with that. But starting with that, I'd like to go to the end. I'm very optimistic about what can be done in Iran. And the reason I'm optimistic is that we have a very entrepreneurial society. I mean, just look at what people are doing over there, what people are doing over here, and all around the world. Number two, half the population, women, in Iran are really, really fantastic compared to almost any other society I'm aware of. And so we have 100% of the population that can help with the solution, not only half, which is unique in that region. We have a combination of large population and natural resources that are very much in demand. And I don't mean necessarily hydrocarbons. I mean rare elements and all kinds of other things that are going to be the backbone of the modern industry. So, and let's face it, we're starting from a very low level. I mean, it's a low bar. It's not hard to fix some very basic things that can unleash this talent that exists in our country. And there are models out there. We don't need to invent the wheel by ourselves. There are lots of models out there that we can take elements that are appropriate with Iran and for Iran and implement. So, but at the end of the day, before we can start on any entrepreneurial activity, which I completely agree with, there needs to be an environment, there needs to be a governance system that allows that kind of entrepreneurship to prosper. And I think that governance starts with trust. You cannot have a vibrant economy without trust. So what goes into creating trust? Rule of law. We need laws, we need a judicial system that we can trust so that you know your property rights are protected and somebody with a lot of muscle can't come and take away the fruits of your labor. We need to eliminate corruption, and this is going to become a very, very important issue as we privatize big sectors of the economy. Faraj talked about 75-80% of the economy being under the control of the various bunyads. Look, we got to get that out of government control and back into entrepreneurial hands. By the way, most of that 75-80% was created prior to 1978 by a lot of entrepreneurial families that have been forced to basically pick up and start all over again here and have done really, really well. So, so I think we need to create that condition of trust by eliminating corruption, protecting investments, and building some trade relationships with other countries that can be helpful to us. We also need to create a system of transparency so that it's very clear. The metrics are very clear in terms of what role government is playing with respect to creating this infrastructure. Capital formation is a vital issue. And the good news is that Iran starts with virtually no foreign debt. All our debt is internal. So we need to recreate the banking system, which needs to be not based on cronyism and who you know, just like you said, and based on fundamentals of sound banking. I'm sure my friend Afsaneh is going to have a lot to say about that. But there's huge upside. We got to allow people to be able to make money initially. I mean, hopefully all the time, but initially you need some examples of people that are really successful in our country so we can attract domestic capital, we can attract foreign capital, and we can attract capital from the diaspora that are very ready to roll up their sleeves and help the people of Iran. But fundamentally, this problem is going to get fixed by the people of Iran. None of us sitting over here, but it's going to get fixed by the people of Iran. But and we can talk about a lot of the constraints, and I'm sure the panel will turn to that, and I have some ideas on that. But I'm at the end of the day, I go to where I started. I am very optimistic because we can leapfrog a lot of the technologies and a lot of steps that have been taken in the last 40, 45 years by other countries and avoid those steps and go to really what the modern technology allows us to do with respect to communication systems, with respect to systems of finance and capital formation, and systems of governance. So at the end of the day, I want to leave you with this very optimistic message.
Afsaneh Khanum.
Honored to be part of this incredible panel, and I think a lot of the really important points have already been made. Sort of staying focused on what Hamid just reminded us of is one, with all the problems that are going on in Iran, we have to remember the size of the population, the size of the economy, because of the oil economy that it's based on, is still quite significant. So from a, we can look at it in different ways and different ways of ranking Iran's economy, but it's approximately a 2 trillion economy. If you sort of look at certain numbers, we can debate that, obviously. But if you compare, for example, Turkey is like a 1 trillion economy, just to put it in context. Iran also sits on, whether we agree with the numbers or not, close to 10% of world oil reserves, 15% of natural gas reserves. And then, of course, access to solar, etc. Everyone has commented on water. World Resources Institute and Stanford have done a lot of studies. Stanford Iranian Studies program have looked at the water issue in Iran. So if we look at the positives and negatives on Iran's economic balance sheet, you have the oil and gas, you have solar on the positive. You also have the human capital that Hamid referred to and a number of other speakers referred to. And within that human resources, we have half of the population, which is women. And I think we cannot forget the fact that despite all these difficulties, and we're all watching with great apprehension what's going on in the schools in Iran right now, as Iranian women are getting somehow poisoned or gassed or hurt. But if we look at the history of Iranian education over the last 100 years, and then even during since the revolution, Iranian women have been allowed and able to, 63% of doctors getting educated are women. Large number of STEM engineers are women. Even today, we would assume that close to Iran might be the 5th largest producer of women STEM experts. So the fact that what is going on in Iranian schools, if it's not stopped immediately, could have a huge impact on this, on the wealth of Iran, on the potential for growth and social and economic growth of Iran. So I think that is a very, very important fact as we're speaking on this panel today to think about. In terms of, again, on the positive side of the balance sheet, you also have an incredible entrepreneurial class. You see a lot of people on this panel who are Iranian entrepreneurs. You have a lot of people in sort of G7 countries, some of the most important people running companies in Fortune 100 companies of Iranian origin. And so when you see that, you realize that there is huge potential there. And when I've worked 20 years in economic development, looking across the globe on different economies, and when you look at the potential of our economy in Iran versus a lot of emerging markets, you just see that potential being enormous. At the same time, again, not to Hamid refer to what you said, I was going to mention, for example, the fact that Iran doesn't have foreign debt is huge. A lot of emerging markets, as we speak, are going through debt restructuring and having major problems. So that's like a big positive, again, on the balance sheet. So how do we, with all the negatives that are going on, that are slowing down from corruption to a government-run economy, and we know when governments run economies, we're just seeing it in China. You went from Chinese trying to sort of use the private sector, having double-digit growth, creation of the tech industry in China, how that worked. And then the last few years, as the role of government has again been super important in taking over the economy and impacting the sector, the tech sector, how it has slowed down economic growth, how it has also got a lot of the Chinese entrepreneurs to leave or not be as productive as they were before. So Iran is no different than any other country, and given all the negatives on its economic balance sheet, we are in a situation that makes me very sad, because when I look at Iran versus a lot of other countries, not just Singapore, but a lot of emerging markets with its potential, its growth rate is so much lower. its inflation is so much higher. Its rate of unemployment is so much higher. The banking sector, it used to be that the central bank of Iran, 20 years ago, plus 30 years ago, before the revolution, it was one of the top central banks. Central bank governors in Iran would be in international conferences talking about how central banks should be run. Even people who were in the central bank from the previous days, because they had gone to some of the best schools and got the best grades at British and American and French and other universities, they would go back to Iran. And I remember working at the World Bank with some of these central bankers. Amazing. Today, they have fewer and fewer resources, and it's becoming a political process. So an organization which for even the first few years of the revolution was run as a technical institution is no longer a technical institution. So that's a big negative on the balance sheet of Iran. So if you have a central bank that is not running well, if you have a banking system where the 7 largest banks are basically public sector banks, where you have had also problems of corruption in some of the banking sector, it's very difficult to use that banking sector for the growth of the economy. And we can go into greater depth in that. Iran has, as you know, does not have access to the SWIFT system, which allows transfer of assets and transfer of money between countries. So last year, it went into the Russian equivalent of SWIFT system. So now it is getting connected into the Russian banks, which themselves have great difficulty, and a system of 100 so-called banks from Eurasia that are in that system. Again, you don't see many Iranians trying to keep their assets in, or anybody really in the emerging world trying to keep, whether they're in Brazil or Mexico or China or anywhere else, holding their assets, foreign assets in Russian rubles or in Chinese currency. They all want US dollars or European or Japanese currency. So this structure that has been created using the Russian equivalent of the SWIFT system is not working too well. Obviously, there's efforts going between Russia and China and others to maybe make that a little bit more global, but I don't have too much faith that that will work. So Iran is essentially cut out of the formal financial system, and on the deficit side of the balance sheet of the economy, I think that's a huge thing. I also don't want to underestimate. On the positive side, we have all these energy resources. On the negative side, as you've all said, the way we have destroyed Iran's environment from water resources. If you look at WRI maps, as I said earlier, among the worst in the world. It is complete red. That is a huge asset. You can live without oil, you can live without water. And so looking at the way the environment has been really impacted is something that will take a lot of investment and a lot of economic resources needing to go back to rebuild that. So we should not underestimate how, if you again look at World Bank or IMF reports, the social indicators in Iran, from health to education to energy to environment, have been negatively impacted as we speak today.
Mr. Tedjarati.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here. I want to avoid repeating a lot of the points that our friends have already mentioned. I wanted to say that one of the things that we did during the time of the JCPOA was that as an American company, when the opportunity opened up, because of the critical areas in which our company had specific technologies such as oil and gas and petrochemicals and aerospace and air pollution, etc., we felt that it was important for us to participate and not allow that gap to be filled, say, by Chinese and other more European or other Asian companies. And as a result, we ended up being the largest American company operating in Iran for that brief period of 18 months or so. We had about 35 people working full-time from outside and another 40 people that we hired in Iran. So a lot of my experiences, um, uh, even though I myself never went there for other reasons. But a lot of my experiences are reflective of those years. One of the things in support of what many have said here, even though it is said that maybe 50, 60% of the economy is in the hands of the state, actually during that period, we found that because for a long time, Iran had a lack of investment in critical infrastructure, those critical infrastructure, in fact, were so skewed in the hands of the states that we did a very detailed analysis, and over 86% of all of the investments that we ended up working with, remember, we were the largest American company, maybe by a factor of 3 or 4. We were, on the reported basis, we were over 85% of the American companies' revenues in Iran. 86% of all of those things went into a handful of companies that most of you know, and those handful of companies are largely related to a central part of the regime. So I think a very big set of policies around creating that environment of trust that Hamid mentioned is exceedingly important. The policies regarding treatment of foreign companies, protection of national assets, but also protecting the SMEs. In fact, we did a post-study, and maybe Afsaneh Khanum would have done similar things, that actually net compared to before and after JCPOA, the general population was actually net poorer because inflation took on because of all the investments and all that, and the economy itself went up, but it only benefited a very, very small portion of the population. So if we don't want to have a runaway situation, we really have to address this balance of it. Bureaucracy and red tape are obvious things. Land use, from my experience, in other places, extremely important, extremely bureaucratic, very, very corrupt. Policies for specific industries that otherwise it will end up creating copycats in each of these industries for us, and really have no results that are long lasting. A lot of people talked about energy, even though Iran had very good global access to technology before 1978, but you can imagine about 40 years of investment or wrong investment in oil, gas, petrochemicals, and others. And we saw the tremendous amount of thirst to put the right technologies. One of the things we found was that technologies that we ourselves had installed in the 50s and 60s was being meticulously maintained in Iran in a very, very creative way by the engineers. Couple of other things that I wanted to mention is that because of the lack of trust, because of the tremendous amount of culture of fear that is in the country, we found that we had to inject a lot of training in basic efficiency and effectiveness of the workforce. There was essentially no ethics of teamwork and sharing of information and data and coming together. But the talent base is such that in a very short period of time, our Iranian population became actually the marvel of the company. They really won over the people. One of the key factors that everybody mentioned were women. Majority of our workers are women. But another factor that comes to mind is that if you look at most of the Gulf states that now have surpassed, of course, in terms of GDP per capita and the development, most of them rely on expat workforce. And that is, over the long term, really not sustainable. Iran is one of the few countries there that not only has does not rely on expat workforce, but has a very, very well-trained and educated workforce, not even comparable to even Egypt, that has a local population in terms of education. So I think back to some of the more optimistic comments that were made, if that little experience of mine was indicative of what can happen, I think I'm extremely positive that if we address those fundamentals, that Iran will have a very, very bright future. And I myself, like most of you out there, are awaiting the day that we can all roll up our sleeves and go out there.
Thank you very much. One point of fact for those of you who might not have access to these bios, the company that Mr. Tedjarati was referring to is Honeywell, and he was in charge of Asian operations for Honeywell. Also a brief administrative note before we return to the panelists. The way we're going to handle the question and answer is at the end of our discussion, is that you can submit your question or vote for other questions, bringing them up in the platform that is called Slido. You can sign on to this. The directions are very easy to follow. And once we get to those, I will be reading the question that has been voted as the most relevant, important question to ask. So please submit your question. So now let's start the same process of people commenting on what has been said, adding to points that you want to focus on. Particularly, I think, I am very interested to hear the question of infrastructure, the question of technology, the question of e-governance, e-commerce, all of these. So beginning with Faraj.
Sure. I mean, you know, where do you begin? The digital infrastructure itself could be a impediment to any economic development, right? You've seen this all over the world. Countries that are well connected and you know, the population grows with their knowledge base of what's going on in the world, gets more in tune with what needs to get done for themselves to get ahead. But just like water security, food security, information and data security also has to be part of the parcel, right? We well know that you know, Iran's internet, although prevalent, it's very slow. And it gets turned on and off as they please, depending on where they feel that there is a security issue for the regime. So access to internet flowing well and being secure, and outside the constant monitoring of the regime, it's really important for people to carry on with their lives and start to exchange ideas and start to talk openly. The infrastructure dollars that have been spent in Iran, which they are spending, most of them are being spent around control of the movement of people, control of the thoughts of people, control of the communication of people. I just recently spoke with someone that had gone from here to Iran to run an operation for their family, and he very clearly said that in the company of the size that they had, they knew that every email, every file, every notion of anything else that they did in that company, a copy of it would be viewed and reviewed by the security forces. And so essentially, you know, that kind of reduces your productivity at work to even exchange ideas, you know, related to work. So, you know, this shift in investing in infrastructure, in data infrastructure, is really, really critical. But what's also critical, and I've said this before as well, is that I think that you know, like in the society that we live here, everybody talks about the First Amendment and Second Amendment in America. if we're looking at the future of Iran or future of any country on the planet, really the right to your information, the right to data, is got to be on top of the list. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be, the world of the future is a knowledge economy. It's a knowledge world, right? And if you don't have access to that data, you're not going to go too far. You need to have the right to access to data, right to internet, to connectivity, and then a privacy of that data. To me, that's very fundamental in how you build a society for the next generation of youth in Iran to build, a good life for themselves and for their children, for the future generations. The other two items I wanted to kind of double click on again is one that Hamid brought up, is that half of the Iran population is our women. They are highly educated. I think it's 60% of university are women. We need to integrate them back into this, and then whatever they need to make sure that they succeed. It's not enough to educate them and then not give them jobs. That's not how the world works. You can't say, oh, well, I graduated 60% in science, and then they come home and then there's nothing for them to do, and you don't provide opportunities for them. So creating that opportunity is all about small companies building entrepreneurial products, services, so that this population can get in, and that requires a total infrastructure that's data privacy, data security, job security, labor laws, anti-discrimination rules, and a whole bunch of things that go into that.
So getting perhaps to some of the concrete on policies in the future. When we talked about, for instance, water resource management, right? As you may know, one of the things that the Islamic Republic did after the revolution was to privatize water. And now we're in a very disastrous situation where the underground water resources have depleted. And I don't exactly remember the numbers, but for instance, 300 centimeters, 3 or 4 meters. And usually it's a disaster if it's above 20, 30 centimeters. So we have order of magnitudes due to that policy alone. So there's certain things that can happen right off the bat, and that's, again, nationalization of water resources to impede further abuse of this very precious water resource. And that, from a operational perspective, is very complex, because now it's been 40 years of that, maybe not 40 years, maybe 30 some years, because it took time for them to change those policies. But the processes that used to exist to control that no longer exist. But with technology, we can address that, and we should start thinking about that. Building the digital infrastructure to manage properly water resources of the country. The other aspect is the communication infrastructure that Faraj talked about. That's an area, because of the tech-savvy population of Iran, I think merits significant investment in building fiber infrastructure across the country and then leasing it to private companies. I think that's absolutely essential for the future of Iran, kind of like what Australia did on that front. And from a software perspective, I think I've always been impressed with what Estonia did in terms of building first some principles on a digital economy and how it would operate. For instance, they came up with concepts of data sovereignty and the fact that people are owners of their own data, right? They created a single digital identity where you wanted to get, for instance, any government services. I forget what the name of their policy was, the one-time policy or something like that, that you never share the information with the government more than once. And that information, if other agencies in the government require it, They should get it through a network that they had built with checks and balances and security to ensure both privacy of citizens. And we can, of course, this is in the government services domain, but today they did that in the early 90s and mid 90s, for what I remember. Today, we can go much farther than that and extend that to the private domain and make sure that people's data not only is protected, but because it has monetary value, it can be monetized by them. So going far beyond what even developed countries can do, and it's because we don't have that legacy. That's really important, that we take advantage of the fact that we can work with a clean slate and do it right. Here in developed countries, it's hard because it has impact on the next quarter results of companies to do disruptive things, for instance. But we have that ability to be able to do things right from scratch. And then all the government services, we can follow the Estonian model. And in terms of attraction of capital, again, there are models with Israel with a small population. Look at how they've managed to put a lot into their R&D. I think 5 to 10% of the GDP is spent into R&D and creating a healthy startup community and attracting foreign capital. We have an advantage over Israel because we have 85 million people. They are dependent on foreign markets. We have a large enough market in Iran, and of course, with the overthrow or the regime change, there'll be peace and prosperity in the Middle East because that's the source of all the problems in the Middle East is the Islamic Republic. Peace and prosperity will come back. There will be no Hezbollah and Hamas and extremists, and those countries become open markets in both in terms of talent that we can leverage and help and create a very prosperous region.
Before you speak, I just want to add a small note. We've had a project at Stanford, Iranian Studies, called the Iran Vision 2040, that has studied aspects of the Iranian economy, including the water system. It's a remarkable set of articles that they wrote. These articles are accessible on our website. They have also been compiled into a book, rewritten and re-edited. One of the authors of the book, Matin, is here with us. I want to confirm and welcome him. So these articles are there. The water situation is truly biblical, what this regime has done in the destruction of the water system. And these scholars have worked very carefully trying to figure it out and figure out the problem of food security in the future of Iran. The Iranian regime keeps talking about feeding 300, 400 million people. They can't even feed the 85 million that they have now. I apologize.
No, it's the important notes because, and I want to go back to some of the facts that were stated from the economic point of view and the GDP of Iran in past. One thing that put it in context for me was my trip to Korea a while ago, and I saw Tehran Street, which is the heart of Seoul, and it's the Silicon Valley of Korea. And Tehran Street, it's the memory or reminder of 1976, the deal that Iran closed with Korea to help them build their economy, give them oil at a cheaper price, and then allowing Korea to build their economy. That was 1976. And look at where Korea is today and where Iran is today. But that also gives you hope because it shows that you can build the country and you can move forward with the right policy, with the right intention, with the right system in place. And speaking of trust, I think one thing that we have to be very, very careful about, and I think Iranian people in Iran know the propaganda machinery of the Iranian government and they don't fall in those traps. but maybe in the diaspora community, we have to be careful with how Iranian government is trying to create divide to rule. And they're trying to create distractions on topics that are irrelevant at this time and therefore direct the attention of people from the revolution and enabling people in Iran to fighting over the type of government, the future of Iran and all that. So we have to be careful about that and be clever about it and not to fall in trap for those disinformation. And that goes back to the trust. And the other thing around the size of the population that we all touched on is also important to note that it's very diverse as well. We have a diverse population in Iran, and despite everything, all the rumors that there's a discussion around dividing Iran, no, they are very united. And we see that, again, it's going back to disinformation, how Iranian government is trying to divide the people by race, but Iranians are coming on the streets and chanting that from Tehran to Zahedan, they just enforcing that unity. How Iranian government is trying to pull Iranian women out of the equation, but they are leading the revolution and they are becoming the hero outside Iran. In the region, their revolution actually enabled Afghani women to come out and do the same, Syrian women to come out and do the same. And we all know that Iran is basically the cancer of the region. And their impact and the negative impact is not limited even to the region, is basically expanded globally. But going back and the opportunity, and again, the optimism and opportunity is to look at what worked outside and what didn't. What are the changes that we need to make? Let's start with policies and principles. Let's actually work together, and even with Iranian people inside Iran, in building those principles, in writing down those principles, in communicating and creating the blueprint architecture of the future of Iran. Whether it's about economy, it's about business model, it's about the way that the system could operate, those are the things that we can do. And then going back to the digital world, again, this is something that is absolutely in turmoil outside Iran as well, and that's the opportunity. I mean, ChatGPT, and I'm not focused on ChatGPT, but the outcome and the attention that it got recently, the AI model, the AI ChatGPT around AI, it illustrated how the digital world can change very dynamically and rapidly. It's no longer about mobile application, but about systems communicating in a more automated way. So when we look at the future of Iran, it's not about let's replicate, let's copy what is available today outside Iran and in developed country and put it in Iran. It's not about it's about what is the future behold, and let's create them in Iran. That's the entrepreneurship. So how can we create the next communication, physical communication, network communication of the future in Iran that is less costly, more energy efficient, more heterogeneous, and it can bring access and connectivity to everywhere, not just dense cities. It can bring communication to also rural areas. What is the next layer of infrastructure of the cloud? It's not about let's rebuild the data centers of Amazon and replicate it there. No, it's about how can we make the cloud more expandable and kind of cheaper, more energy efficient, and more scalable. It's not about let's build the mobile application of social media, of Facebook equivalent of it in Iran, but it's about let's create the social media that is more truth-based. It doesn't have the challenges of creating a cyber account and flooding the world with disinformation, but what would be the type of equivalent of it that is more fact-based and fact-driven? How can we bring government contracts into transparent level? How can we create a transparency that every action and transaction is visible to the rest of the community while you're maintaining the data privacy of users? How can we create an economy around data for the data producers? Something that again is a hot topic right now here, that the corporate are taking the data of the users in order to decide on the future of the corporate and to disintermediate the user. If an Uber driver is basically sharing its data to Uber to create autonomous driverless car, what happened to the driver? So now there is an opportunity on creating an economy in Iran that creates that ride share, but with the element that the data belongs to the data producer, or the data that goes to the corporate actually enables the driver to be a shareholder of that company because they participate in the economy and the growth of the corporate. How can we bring, so these are, when we talk about banking system, how can we take the traditional bank with the future work and combine it to create the new banking system? So these are the things that I think when we look at it, and again, when we talk about the blueprint architecture, or at least I refer to it as a blueprint architecture of the country, is actually first, let's write them down, let's create them, let's create the policies, let's define them, let's define the principles, and those are some of the contributions that we can have from outside Iran to enable them. But at the end of the day, the decision is obviously theirs. They are responsible, and they are basically the drivers of their own fate and future.
Well, you make a lot of interesting points, and I wanted to build on three of them. I'll tell you a little story. I was talking to a UPS executive about 10 years ago, and it was a gentleman who'd been pretty senior in the company and remembered the old days in Iran. And he told me a funny story. He told me that in 1978, UPS was trying to go global for the first time, and they were looking at the highest potential economies in the world. And there were three countries that they narrowed it down to: Singapore, South Korea, and Iran. Okay. And among the three, they selected Iran to go into because they saw the most opportunity in Iran at that time. And it's ironic that we're sitting here talking about those countries as models. The second thing I wanted to build out on what you said is this importance of unity. There's all kinds of narratives out there that all of us are probably agents of the CIA or want to do something nefarious or whatever. I mean, these people are geniuses in creating divisions within our community. We're none of that. And all we want is to see the country that we're all from do better, and the people of Iran to do better. And finally, the points that you made about leapfrogging technology is a really important one, because we don't need to replicate all the capital-intensive things that have been done in the last 30, 40 years. We can jump all over them. But let me raise two of my own issues, which I think are pretty important. One is, why now, and why is the timing so important? The timing is so important for fixing this because we have a demographic window of opportunity. The population growth rate of Iran went into the mid 3% range, highest in the world, in the period between the late 70s and the late 80s. Those people are now 35 to 50 years old, and there's a lot of them. And they're in the most highly productive stage of their life and their careers. If we don't fix this now, in 10, 20 years, this big bubble will need a lot of healthcare, will need a lot of retirement benefits, and the population growth rate behind it is very slow. It's in the low 1% range. So you won't have enough workers supporting all the healthcare of the population that is now aging out, but is very productive today. So that's one reason for the urgency of what we're talking about. The second reason for the urgency is that these people are about to make a bunch of deals with Russians and Chinese and all that on very suboptimal infrastructure investments. And the problem with that is that it takes away one of the big advantages that we have now that we all talked about, which is that Iran has no foreign debt. If you invest in a lot of expensive infrastructure based on loans provided for you by these countries that are only looking out for themselves, we're going to take away that advantage. Yeah. And if these investments were going into the most productive activities, that'd be fine. But I guarantee you they're not going to go into the most productive activities. They're going to go into the most profitable activities for the agents that are in between that capital and the project. So those are two reasons for why this needs to happen pretty quickly. On the topic of infrastructure, let's not forget there are three types of infrastructure. The first is that the one that the rest of the panel knows much more about than I do, which is the digital infrastructure, and there the issues of IP protection and all that are really, really important. So let me leave that one and turn into physical infrastructure, which is something that I know of. And the physical infrastructure is 40, 50 years old, and there's no way you can engage in the global economy without having ports, without having airports, without having road systems, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really important that those investments be prioritized so that they can pay back pretty quickly and we don't become an indebted nation. And finally, there's the infrastructure that nobody talks about, particularly in Iran, which is the managerial infrastructure. We tend to all be into the STEM and science and engineering part of it. But there's a whole managerial aspect that is critical to an entrepreneurial society. And Iran was actually doing pretty well on this. I mean, ICMS, the business school that was formed in the 70s in Iran, in affiliation with Harvard Business School, was training all kinds of great managerial talent that were running all these entrepreneurial companies in Iran in the 70s. We shut it down and turned it into a religious university. It's crazy. We got to develop a managerial class in Iran that's committed, that's incentivized, and can really lead all these other efforts into some productive outcomes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Afsaneh.
Thank you, Hamid. I think a lot of the points have been made, and in terms of sort of, and I'm glad that Dr. Milani also highlighted the book that Matin Mirazani and Puyazadi and others have done on the economy in Iran since 1979. I think for those of you who have not read it, it's a really incredible book. And the fact that 1.5 trillion was collected between 79 and 2020 in oil income, and the fact that there's so little to show for that, I think is a really sad fact, apart from all the other things that have been mentioned already. And the fact that close to 40 to 50% of the labor force is underemployed or unemployed. That's huge compared to most countries. But just in terms of data, again, we talked about poverty. More than half of Iran's population is living under international poverty lines. Iran is in the World Bank ranking, I think 127th country in terms of ease of doing business. I think Mongolia even is above Iran, and maybe there are very few countries below Iran. So it's today that difficult to do business with Iran. In terms of talent, we have talked about a number of things, but when we think about, whether it is the first woman ever to get the Math Field Prize, Mariam Mirzakhani, or the first woman to lead the next space trip to space, and she's an Iranian origin woman, I think born in the U.S., but first commander of NASA to be a woman. Again, it just reminds you of the talent pool that is sitting in Iran and outside of Iran, ready to serve Iran and the rest of the world. And we've talked about a lot of examples, but let's just think about the things that could turn around really fast. And by the way, I have also in all these years encouraged World Bank and IMF to to have a collaboration and a dialogue with Iran, because a dialogue, regardless of the regime, is the job of this institution. I think Iran is one of the largest shareholders of the IMF, and the fact that Iran is not using those resources for leapfrogging in finance, in fintech, in financial inclusion, in all the things that you all have talked about, to me is shocking, both on the side of Iran, but also in the side of the other shareholders who, in order to change Iran, you have to bring it into the international world, and you have to, whether financial resources are provided or not, to have that dialogue so that there is a conversation going on all the time. So look at, again, a number of the examples we talked about. I think, as Hamid was speaking, I am really scared about this new dimension of Iran, Saudi, China, Russia getting together, but particularly taking on loans from China. Again, not to dump on China. I've worked on China for 30 years, and it's great power, great economy, but we have been all reading the same articles. And last week there was the World Bank and IMF spring meetings, and what is scary is the loans that China provided to a lot of emerging markets have blown up. They have a very high ratio of disasters and a very high ratio of projects not going well. And what has happened is there is no rule of law. So what they have put in contracts is something that has never existed in any kind of aid contract. You have your port built or your infrastructure built by China, your airport or whatever. If you cannot pay back your loan, i.e. your government cannot pay back the loan, China takes over your port, owns it. That is very unusual. That's happening as we speak in many African countries. So the fact that the Iranian leadership don't even read the newspaper and take a loan from somebody who can take over your infrastructure is really scary. The fact that our ocean, our Gulf, Persian Gulf is depleted of fish because of the way the contracts were given out. The Caspian Sea is depleted in other ways, really makes it important because there are still resources that Iran could use today to at least get the best terms of trade, to get better terms if you're negotiating with Russia and China and other neighbors, but preferably to take loans from people who have your interests at heart rather than people who are going to take over your assets if you cannot pay your loans, I think is going to be really, really important. And Hamid, you made me very nervous. The other thing is, let's just look in the neighborhood in Iran. UAE is going to be chairing the next meeting of COP28. You look at Iran in terms of knowledge and history. If we were looking at this 30 years ago, 20 years ago, etc., you would not think that UAE, if you had to decide, is it UAE who's going to run the COP28 or Iran, you would have thought it's Iran. So we have fallen so far back in the world economy, the ease of doing business, the rule of law, I won't even go into digital infrastructure. You've all done such a better job on that. But this is the time that if we can bring in also financial digital tools, we can do two things. One, affect corruption, because with digital financial infrastructure, you cannot necessarily have the freedom to have corruption at the scale and level and size that goes on in Iran, like some other countries. But secondly, you can help build out the infrastructure of Iran using its own resources and some other resources in a modern way, using fintech, using new banking, new financial tools, new financial infrastructure that even today with limitations it can do. So I think one of the things that is important is we know the limitations of this regime. We know that state regimes do not handle the economy really well. We know that the role of the private sector and technology is really important, and the entrepreneur class in Iran is among the largest. So how do we take advantage of those assets? Even while this regime is still ruling Iran, let's find ways to provide knowledge to it so that it does not leave Iran with the kind of debt and liabilities that will not allow Iran to go to its next step of development and leave it in a way that for the next 100 years, it becomes the worst country to do business in. At least move up to from 127th country to maybe the level of Mongolia at 80.
Let's do better than that.
نرود میفاخدید بر سنگ, but please, Mr. Tedjarati.
Yes, well, full disclosure, I'm dialing in from Shanghai, China. And I'm glad that
Watch your words.
And we're using Zoom.
I'm glad the whole issue of China came up, having lived and worked here for nearly 30 years. I think, and having been fairly close, especially last 3 weeks when I'm on the flight back home on Sunday, I will write my observations of the past 3 weeks. It's like I've lived 3 different lives in the past 3 weeks of all the people we met and the changes I've seen. But a lot of people that are also very deeply aware and very close to the deals that have been done with Iran. It really confirms that it's unparalleled since the Turkmenchai Treaty and the Golistan Treaty on the kinds of concessions that the Chinese have gotten, and I wouldn't blame the Chinese on that. It's always the other side that really needs to be able to be protective of that. I think they're going to be disastrous for Iran, and it's not going to lend itself to a lot of development of the country. And there are many examples of it, as you've already pointed out, in South Pacific to Africa to other countries. And Iran should not be in a position of small South Pacific nations that have to succumb to such terrible deals. It's probably the strongest country that has struck the weakest deals with China. And I watch these deals very closely. But because China has come up, I actually want to draw some parallels, because there has been good development in China, but there also, we've seen with the state control in the last 10 years, particularly, what some of the bad effects of it. But the first, say, 20, 25 years of that development, there's been a lot of things. Hamid mentioned demographics. That was exactly the case 30 years ago with China. And had they not actually gotten on that bandwagon, there is no way on earth that today China would be able to address and become both the factory of the world, build the supply chain in the world, build all these entrepreneurs. And already China is aging rapidly, and its population will start shrinking. And had they not had this period, China would have been one of the poorest nations on earth. So I think for Iran, this is exceedingly important. The other couple of parallels that I would draw, I am also definitely of the camp that it is the people of Iran that are going to ultimately lift the nation, make their choices on what kind of society we want to have there, et cetera, et cetera. But the role of both overseas returnees, which in the case of China was also very significant compared to Iran, cannot be underestimated. I saw it with my own eyes. I've been a firsthand witness of it, where in every single industry, those overseas returnees, when they found confidence that if they came back, they wouldn't be stuck, there were an opportunity to grow, their capital was safer, et cetera, et cetera. And that was around mid-1990s. Even early 1990s, if you sent somebody from China to America, there was at least 2 out of 3 chance that they would just disappear and not return. But post mid-1990s, actually, people started coming back, and they wouldn't want to stay in America because a real opportunity was there. And every single industry, whether it was venture capital, whether it was in the industrial development, in real estate development, et cetera, the role of the diaspora was huge. And it takes about 10 to 15 years, in my experience with China, that then a local population begins to actually flourish. and they start from garage imitation to then brand imitation and then minor innovation, and then they get into real innovation, real entrepreneurship, which are the stages that China has developed. That takes 10, 15 years. And again, we're up against that demographic if we don't start that now. The other one is the role of multinationals. Although now Chinese economy is largely dominated by local competition, it's the week of Shanghai Auto Show now. You should just see how Western auto companies are absolutely frightened of what's going on with Chinese innovation in that area. But it took a good 30 years of multinational companies investing in China, as well as reaping those benefits for Western economies, that they lifted quite a bit of the capabilities in technology, in supply chain, in manufacturing, in services, you name it. And I think that has to also be front and center. So I think it's a model of development to say we have to welcome what's already there and not have to reinvent the wheel and leapfrog. At the same time, also protect the economy, especially the small and medium-sized businesses, so we don't end up with a Russian-type economy, which would be a complete disaster. These are the couple of points that I thought to mention on the back of the comments that were made.
Yeah, if I just make a comment here, like in the late 90s, when the world was going to broadband connectivity for internet, we were active in Japan. And the Japanese had a really hard time deploying the US version or the European version of the standards that were coming up for the DSL technology, which was broadband. And so we were meeting with the folks in the telecom there at the time, and we realized that the history of what happened in Japan after World War II was they were so poor that in order to lay telephone cables, they went and found the cheapest telephone cables they could find, which was the pairs of wires in your phone were insulated by paper pulp because they could get it a little bit cheaper, right? I mean, this is World War II, right? It's not, what is it, 90 years or something? 90 years ago. And that's where that country started after World War II. And look where it got to in the 80s, where, you know, Americans couldn't stop talking about Japan and Japan products, Japan quality. They took a $25,000 check and wrote it to AT&T Bell Labs to license their transistor. And then they turned it into transistor radios, where at that time, if you guys remember, in the 60s and 70s, everybody had one in their pocket and walking around and made humongous. Sony was basically built on this transistor radio. So the point is that Iran is far, far better situation today than any of these other countries that moved up to be contenders in the world. We have a bad starting spot, but it's not as bad as it could be. Now, it could get worse. Give them a few more years, they make it worse for you. The point is there's humongous hope for what we can build on the positive side of things in Iran. And all the ingredients are there. And for Iranians to look at their diaspora community, whether it's here and it's Europe, they came out of Iran. They didn't speak the language mostly when they walked out. And yet they were able to build companies and businesses and become one of the most successful communities in America, at least, right? So if we can do it here, we can do it in Iran. If there's a democracy that's established, and you know, lack of democracy leads to corruption, and corruption leads to economic disaster, which is what we have in Iran right now. And the flip side of that is, once the people decide they want to establish a good functioning democracy, take away the corruption and economic opportunity comes there, because in Iran we have the talent, we have the culture, and we have the ability of hard work and the culture of hard work. And so really those are the ingredients of making successful businesses and bring back the economy and bring back success to the people. So I just, on that note, there's a lot of positives out there for us. There's a lot to be done, obviously, but the historical examples are there, and the facts are in our favor. As far as the statistics go, there's another statistics I just recently read about, which in 2016, they hired, Iranian government hired people to do an audit of the pension funds and the banks. 25 out of the 25 pension funds that they tested were already in bankruptcy, right? 25 out of 25. So when you see on media, oh, it's this guy that hasn't gotten his retirement paycheck for 6 months, there's a good reason. It's bankrupt,
Yeah.
right? And, and of course, every bank is got funny money balance sheets that eventually it's going to come home to roost. But there is hope. There is the ability of the community and the education and the people and the women in Iran get added back into this, into this economy. And I think good things can happen.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we ask each of you to say a few words of, initially we asked what was the most important thing. What of the topics we indicated was not covered and you would like to have a discussion of it or a reference to it? Briefly, so that we can then spend the last 15, 20 minutes to some of the questions that have come up and have been voted upon. Is that okay?
Sure. Go ahead.
I guess, to me, what is top of mind for me, not only for after the transition, but even in order to have a speedy regime change in Iran, is to control the flow of disinformation and the success of the Islamic Republic in dividing the opposition. Just a few days ago, I was somebody sent me a video of a discussion between a group of, for instance, monarchists and leftists in Kurdistan. Both of them, they were saying that we believe in tamamiyat arzi, or the united Iran, but trust was not there. They say, yeah, this guy is saying that, but we don't believe it because they did this 40 years ago. And the regime is using social media, and they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars. And of course, all of us know that disinformation is one of the byproducts of years of training of KGB that are training these people. They are fueling this disinformation and creating division, which will slow down the regime change. And to me, that's top of mind, and we have to all be aware of it and not fall into the trap, not focus on the fact that in order for us to do the changes that we are saying, first, this regime needs to fall, right? And that will not happen if we can't take back control of the social media channels. And that it's not only about technology, it's about culture. It's about that trust, element of trust, that you don't assume other people's intentions. If someone is willing to sign a basis of unity and say, I believe in a united Iran, we should believe them, and not question that. If someone says that I'm not going to establish a dictatorship, I don't want a dictatorship, I want a secular government, that should be trusted, right? And that trust comes from transparency. The transparency we can bring with technology. We have now all sorts of tools to do that. But the culture change and the trust in each other is something that no technology will bring. And it requires for us to change that mindset, be united, and get rid of the cancer first before we can start building a healthy country.
Yeah. I think to add to the point that you mentioned, believe in them, just going to expand on it, that yes, when somebody says, I'm going to sign the the unity, the base of unity, you hold them accountable to it, and you contribute to enhance that base of unity. If you have other views, if you have things that you see is missing in there, you add to it, you participate in making it stronger. And then as you build the system, you bring transparency, accountability, checks and balances, and consequences to that base of unity, into everything, as far as I see it. And just quickly touch on that cultural change. We also have the culture of always blaming it to others. Americans didn't want us to succeed. British didn't want us to succeed. That guy created revolution. It wasn't us. It was another guy. And that's something that we need to basically cleanse ourselves off of it. I love this quote that says, "No drop of rain blame itself for the flood." The reality is that we all individually have accountability toward the impact that we have on the society. So that's something, again, to the cultural point of view, we have to kind of get rid of it and acknowledge that the mistakes we made, accept the accountability, and stop blaming it on others. At the end of the day, I look at a country operation as a larger scale business operation. You have a business, you have competitors, and you have that you can turn into competition if you are clever about it. So the relationship between two countries would be the same, in my opinion, in a larger scale. And that's why, bringing transparency to the operating entity and holding people accountable for the action that they take is very important. But I also want to touch on what Hamid said around IP, because that's also very important in the future of Iran, and how do you protect intellectual properties, and in fact enable other players in the country to take advantage of it without, for example, paying royalty fees, but at the same time, if external wants to use it, they have to pay for it. I always give the example of Siavash, the inventor of Alamouti code. He didn't get any for his contribution. And I think with the digital era, those notions need as part of the change. That, okay, if you are participating in creating a technology, regardless of where you work, at the end of the day, that royalty fee or a fraction of that royalty fee need to go back to the individual regardless as well. And these are part of creating an open economy that everybody benefit from it based on their contribution, whether the contribution is IP or whether the contribution is in fact utilizing the technology or being a customer of that technology. So I think that layer of IP and how do we manage IP and how do we monetize IP and how do we generate income from IP for the contributors, and the contribution can be also, okay, one person invented, the other person is take it and enhance it and create another technology from it and bring it back to the society. One model of it to me, a partial model of it to me, is like the way that Israeli government right now funding innovation. And when they fund innovation, they basically hold entrepreneurs accountable to keep the innovation or to keep the company or to keep the operating entity in Israel while they can sell to others. But the government of Israel is also taking benefit from the growth of that business without creating a limiting factor for the company to be able to basically sell their solutions. Another example of it is Canada, and how they're incentivizing the government of Canada, how they're incentivizing innovation and creation of the IP by funding startup companies, but not limiting, creating limitation for companies' growth. So I think these are the part of things that we can also look at and apply to future of Iran.
Great. It's interesting. Whenever you talk, I take a lot of copious notes because actually it triggers thoughts that I wanted to share. Look, we got to learn to give credit where credit is due. We can all talk about how terrible the Chinese are. I happen to disagree. I think this government or its previous governments have lifted 600 million people out of abject poverty in a period of 30 years. Yes, they haven't done it in a pretty way. Do they have problems? Of course they have problems. Everybody does. But just like we shouldn't blame everybody else for our problems, we should also give credit to where credit is due, number one. Number two, it bothers me that our Persian Gulf is going to the word Gulf without a label and on its way to the Arabian Gulf. And the stature of Iran in the world community has become what it's become today. It bothers me. And I know I share this with all my co-panelists that we're here to do whatever we can to change that. I am in awe of the people of Iran, their courage, the courage of the women in Iran to put so much sacrifice into changing what we're seeing there today. This is unprecedented, and we're here to support you, and we are with you all the way. So where does this leave me? As I started, I'm very optimistic. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be a lot of hard work, but it's imminently doable, and I think we're all working together, hand in hand, can make it happen. So let's just get the governance right, and the rest will take care of itself.
Thank you. Afsaneh Khanum.
Completely agree with you in terms of China's development. I think is unprecedented. No country in history has ever grown the way China has grown over the last 20 years. And as you said, poverty in the world is less because of what China has done to its own population, despite all the other issues. But nonetheless, in its relations with other countries, it's China first. So I think if you're negotiating with it, you should just remember that and remember to protect your own rights and not that. I think that's what I wanted to highlight. The second thing is they were so smart when I worked at the...
There's some problem of your sound. They're trying to see whether there's any way we can fix it on this side. Mr. Tedjarati, maybe you can...
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think maybe the problem was on the other side. Yeah, I also definitely want to acknowledge what both Hamid and Afsaneh said about China. I wouldn't be here if I thought otherwise. It's the greatest transformation in modern history of human condition. And they got a lot of things right, and they got a lot of things wrong, because there's no such thing as a manual for transforming 1 billion people and bringing them out of poverty, and especially when the model was not actually a Western development model. So I think there's a lot of credit that goes there, and Iran is going to have to find its own model to do the same. I think one of the things that when you're outside of North America, you hear a lot, and being an Iranian and being in China and other places, I've been traveling a lot around the world, that you hear, is how almost nobody wants this revolution to succeed. And whether it's the Russians, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the Gulf, be against Iran's economy, et cetera, is going to rob the rest of the people. So there's a lot of consensus that nobody wants this thing to succeed. But I actually stand with many of you panelists there, that I think that in this particular juncture, we will probably be witnessing one of the most unique phenomena in the world. And that is that a truly homegrown, women-led, popular revolution that really has been building up for maybe over 200 years of Iran going through various different stages of the pangs of anguish of modernity. The last 40 years of it is just one very, very, very vivid example in our own lifetimes that it is, in my view, going to happen because the people of Iran want it, because we have a very different situation than 100 years ago when we were going through the constitutional reform in Iran, where we have a much greater participation of the community that is really well educated and the greatest participation of women almost anywhere in the world. So I remain very, very positive. I don't listen to all the noise that, Ingilisan Emekhan or whatever, or these people don't want it, China doesn't want it, that doesn't want it. I think the people of Iran have spoken, and it's only a matter of time. And I think whatever we can do to accelerate so that we actually take advantage of this window and not end up diminishing the return that they can get with the incredible talent is really, really worthy.
I think you need to look at the country. I'm aware of the business deals that China is closing with Africa and the hefty price on it. But you first have to question why a country is so rich in mineral resources live under poverty line with no infrastructure. And it's the fault of the government that agree to those type of contracts, So I think it's the same thing. You have to be clever about it. You have to sign the right agreement. But obviously, in case of Iran, is also, it's somewhat different because we already know that the Iranian government is a dictator government, and it doesn't listen to it. They don't listen to their people to begin with. So that makes a slight difference, and that's why our role in facilitating and enabling the people in Iran to continue with their revolution and help them to get rid of this government and then be clever about every business deal that the country signs with any other country.
I think I have to add a small point. The Iranian model under the Shah was the Chinese model. We'll give you economic development minus democracy. And they delivered. The regime's model is claiming to follow China, but it's the exact opposite. They took a thriving economy, the statistics that Hamid, and drove it into the ground and are negotiating with some of the best negotiators in the world in China from the most abject point. So it is the shame of this government if they allow China to abuse them. And it is their responsibility. Afsaneh Khanum, I hope we have you back.
That was absolutely, I apologize. That was has never happened. I don't know if you could hear that very bizarre noise that interrupted me. I don't know if you could hear it or I could hear it. But anyways, what I was about to say is the only one topic that we have not discussed that I would put on the agenda, which is we've touched on, of course, through the whole conversation, is education, because obviously Iran's culture and history, and Dr. Milani has written about this for a while, is really the strength of the culture and it's the importance of education in Iranian culture. And despite any regime and previous regime, current regime, and future regimes, you see that Iranian people want to have the best education. And Dr. Milani, you have introduced me when I have been to Stanford to Iranian students who went to high school in Iran, came to Stanford, and their math Olympiads and their physics Olympiads. So just the fact that we have this incredible resource, and imagine what they could do back in Iran in terms of their contributions, and that is people who are 18, 19, 20. And I just think that is a wealth that very few countries have that you cannot replace. So regardless of, other things, whether it is oil, whether it is other resources, you can live, those are things that come and go, but your people are the things that are the biggest source of wealth. And I think Iran is very, very fortunate in terms of the people who are living in Iran and the people who have left Iran, in terms of that incredible source. And if we could do anything to keep up the level of the education, to make sure that while people are in Iran, they have access to the absolute best education resources through the technology that you've all talked about, I think that will be very, very important, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I think education has always had the highest priority and respect in Iranian culture, and that has always stayed with Iranian to ensure that they go through schooling, they go through degree, and the desire to be educated has always been the basis of Iranian people. And I think with digital technology and the era of AI and what we're talking about outside Iran around innovation and all that, obviously what we educate people and how we educate people is also part of the discussion of innovation.
One of the trends that I think is important, and in the outline we indicated that we should at some time discuss this, is that I think there is a small but important change in Iranian attitude towards education. There is much more interest in vocational training. The idea of getting a college degree and having a college degree is becoming much less the status symbol that it was. People are beginning to understand the entrepreneurial skill that you're talking about, that you, if you want to know something, it's much more important to have vocational. There is a decline in applications to the top colleges, and there is a rise in applications to vocational schools in Iran.
By the way, the same thing's going on here.
Yes.
Probably we shouldn't talk about this at Stanford, but same thing is going on here.
Afsaneh Khanim, if you were here, I would have introduced you to one of those students that you referred to, someone who came from high school in Iran, was an Olympiad, finished Stanford Computer in, I think, 3 years, started a company, and has already exited it, and drove me around in his Ferrari and showed me how it was done. So let's.
Some of those students are women, by the way. I think some of your students have been women. So
I think more than half of them have been, at least more than half, and many of the Olympiads that you're talking about. But you know, Stanford believes in diversity, so. I think we have about 10 minutes left, and we're going to address at least one or two of the questions. And the system that we have here allows you to vote for questions, and I'm going to go with the question that has, not surprisingly maybe, achieved the most votes. And that's the question of how do you nourish startups in Iran? What is the process of nourishing and encouraging startups in Iran? And you have all talked about the need to do this. Is it possible to do it at this time? How would it be done?
So, if I can say this, I think there are two things, simply, very simply. You need an environment of mentorship so that they can look at other people who've done it and get the courage that they can do it, to get the confidence that they can do it. And I think in Iran, capital, availability of capital, and family relationships have been combined together. We need to disaggregate those so that there's a professional way you can allocate capital to the best ideas, and flow of capital no longer depends on the family that you were born in. We do those two things, it will work.
Yeah, I think in a society like Iran, in my opinion, the first thing that needs to happen, you need for people to take the entrepreneurial risk. They need to look at that as a good way to reach a great result, financial result, first and foremost. When you live in a society where bribery and who you know is dominant, and people are not in the jobs they need to be in, and yet they reach to the point of being a minister or this or that. To be honest with you, that could be discouraging to building a social fabric where people are willing to take risk with their reputation and time and effort. So preparing that groundwork where it's a merit-based system, as I said before, is really important. But at the same time, I think, when you really, just look at Iranians that come here. the student you talked about driving around in Ferrari only a few years after they've come here. Iranians are entrepreneurial. I happen to think that, the reason why Iranians are so successful when they move to a free country is because Iranians by nature are ambitious. They're ambitious, they're educated, and they're willing to put the hard work in. We didn't learn that here, we learned that there. And so I'm assuming and I'm believing that fundamental individual drive to become a successful entrepreneur exists. It's the environment that's missing. So, so yeah, you just do an A-B comparison, right? Iranians in Iran have a PhD, drive around a cab. Iranians here, they come over, they get a bachelor's degree, they go build a company worth 10 billion. What changed? Is the environment that they're in and the freedom they get to move.
If I may add something very related to this, I totally agree with the points that were made by Hamid and Faraj. But you had another question in there that, is it possible to do that now? Or do conditions have to dramatically change? I actually don't think it is possible to do that now. To get real entrepreneurship going for all the reasons that were there. But you look at the history of the past 20 years, where a lot of VCs started and died, and good startups came up, and what happened to them. I don't want to repeat the names and the situations. I think that that environment of entrepreneurship, unfortunately, needs that different environment for it to thrive, and those conditions are not there now. There are other things we can do to support, such as connectivity, such as other ways in which we can support the economy and the people. But I don't believe that environment of entrepreneurship today is possible on a sustained basis.
So I guess
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, please go on. Please go ahead.
So in my mind, as both everyone said, access to capital is of course key, but government R&D spend, especially for long-term foundational solutions and technologies that may take a decade or more. This is not something that you can expect private capital to take the entire burden. So policies of the new government is absolutely essential. And again, trust for the entrepreneur that if they're going to spend years to build companies, that they have the same playing field as others, or merit-based system that Faraj mentioned. That's absolutely key, and I completely agree that in the current environment, it's completely impossible and requires a regime change for startups to flourish in Iran.
Yeah, entrepreneurs are risk takers. They're not crazy.
Right. The only thing I was going to add is, maybe you also make sure that young people in Iran knows about like Y Combinator, because Y Combinator, let's say, has entrepreneur school. They can go on the internet, see how to do things. Obviously, it's set up not just for U.S. entrepreneurs. You can many Nigerians, Kenyans are getting funding from YC to start their companies, and Nigeria is not exactly the easiest country or the least corrupt country to do business. And I'm not comparing it with Iran, but the point is, the least we could do is make sure that young people there have access to the same. That's like going to vocational school is going to entrepreneur school. Some of it is not relevant to them, but some of it, like Hamid said, mentoring or finding certain structures that work even in today's Iran would be helpful for them. And even if it's not helpful for them this second, it might be helpful in their lifetime.
Can I add a couple of things?
Of course.
I think going back to everybody's point from the we are by nature entrepreneur because we always resisted something back in Iran as well. So I think that's where it's coming from. But I think you can design entrepreneurial programs that actually starts with university with a goal that you graduate with leaving the university, start with your company formed at the seed stage. And that entire curriculum is about design your business plan, marketing plan, match with the corporate in terms of the problem you're solving, match with the academic research of what the country needs, form your team, build your solution, have R&D funding from government, have private funding, and now when you graduate, you have a company that already at the seed stage that can now launch and go from there.
Yeah, and one more thing is very important is the access to global talent. So as much as talented as the country may be, we may be missing in some areas we really don't know. So having an open place that we can bring in people from abroad and absorb them into localized companies is also important.
Well, it's been a long session. I think we need to, we said at 12 o'clock, we ended at 12. I want to add on, end on a note of optimism, as Hamid also said. I've been in diaspora now for about 35 years. A meeting like this, with this level of successful Iranian entrepreneurs, willing to give of the most important thing they have, which is their time. I'm sure many people think that their capital might be more important, but their capital is valuable because they value their time. And the amount of time, the amount of hours these people have spent in the last few weeks to think about and plan this and spend the time here with us. And some of the energies that are started, some of the energies, for example, that have been started by Faraj and a group of, Faraj is extremely successful, Khanum Sampur, the Kai, the Iranian entrepreneurs that are trying to solve some of the most basic problems of censorship and sovereignty of ideas and give sovereignty to the social space back to Iranians. These are what makes me think, exactly as Hamid said, this is a rare historical moment that change can be brought. And one of the key elements of success is to ignore the noise, ignore the bots, ignore the advocates of conspiracy theories, and believe that a better tomorrow is possible for Iran. And people who are around this table, not me, these people, have shown how it can be done. And that, to me, is one of the most optimistic signs that the day of reckoning for this cursed regime is not far away. Thank you very much.